Hi, and welcome to the Beer Temple. I am Chris Quinn, and today we are doing a show on Four Hands Brewing out of St. Louis, Missouri. This is a brewery that I have very little personal experience with. I've been hearing good things about them. I'm hoping that they're going to make it up to the Chicago market soon. I've been given all three of these bottles at different times, two of them from the president of Four Hands, who has shopped in the store a couple times, so it's kind of cool. So thank you to Kevin from Four Hands Brewing. A little background on these guys. St. Louis brewery, part of this kind of small renaissance in craft brewing in the heart of big macro, which is St. Louis, Anheuser-Busch. And a lot of really fun stuff is going on right around there. We've got Perennial, which I've had on the show before, Urban Chestnut, which we've had on the show before, Schlafly, which we've had on the show before. So why not have Four Hands as well? I've got three beers here today, a couple special offerings. We've got the Resurrection IPA, which is one of their, I believe, year-round offerings. And we have a barrel-aged beer here, which is called Volume 1, and it is a Russian Imperial Stout with coffee and chocolate aged in bourbon barrels. So, a lot going on there. Let me see, Volume 1. Yeah, this is their first wood-aged release. Another really cool thing about this beer, the label is printed on wood veneer, so it's a tiny little thin piece of wood. It's really cool. I don't know if you can see that at all, but yeah, it's actually printed on wood. And last but not least, Cuvee Ange, which is a wild ale aged in a combination of wine barrels and with fruit added as well, raspberries and blackberries. So I figured why not start, we'll probably go this way. Why don't we start with the Resurrection IPA and move forward. Might help to actually use the proper end of the bottle opener. So Resurrection IPA, hopped with Mosaic hops, one of the newer American hops out there on the market, known for that very berry quality to it. Very, very hot hop right now. This beer is pouring a nice kind of amber golden color. Classic Mosaic hop nose and quite aromatic here. Very big tropical note, but then it does skew into like a fruity. I get a lot of like juicy fruit. Rather than pink bubblegum, think of like that flavor of juicy fruit. In some ways very similar to kind of the Citra hop family, where it's these big tropical over-the-top fruit notes. I'm really not getting much of the underlying malt bill. I'm just getting the hops. Very pretty nose. Reminds me kind of the Annika that we had recently from Three Floyds and Half Acre. Yeah, really nice, kind of a green herbaceous berry quality. People say blueberry. I don't necessarily get blueberry, but that's just me. Light mouthfeel, still some structure to it though. A good amount of bitterness. This is a dry beer. I mean, there is some body, but you're not really picking up any malt sweetness, any biscuity, crackery notes, really. It is all about the hops, both aromatically and then on the bittering end. This is a bitter beer. I guess I should have known, starting with the IPA. Quite a bitter beer. This tastes like it's up in the 70 IBU range, something like that. But only 6.5% alcohol. So for all those hops, it is still pretty much a sessionable beer. And in fact, I think this is one of the beers that they are going to transition into a 4-pack, which is great. I mean, this is a 4-pack beer. Really solid IPA. I'm gonna go 92 with this one. If you're a fan of that Mosaic hop quality, that really kind of fruity hop nose, skewing a little bit away from the pine and even some of like the citrus and into those more ripe fruits. Bordering on tropical, but more like this kind of berried juicy fruit thing. All right. Cuvee Ange, or Ange. Ange. This one, like I mentioned previously, is a beer fermented with some wild yeast and in a combination of French wine barrels. So it's Cabernet Merlot and Grenache, I believe. So kind of a little bit jumping around there. You can see, you know, the Brett seems to be doing its work. Brettanomyces is a quote-unquote wild yeast. It ferments more fully than regular brewer's yeast, so it can actually consume sugars that are too complex for brewer's yeast. So you get a dried out beer if given time, because Brett also works very slowly, much slower than regular brewer's yeast. It's also much less well understood, so you never kind of know how your beer is going to go. So on this one here, I'll give myself a biggish pour just to kind of rinse out some of the IPA that was in there. Ooh, very, very vinous. Good amount of oak here as well, and it really, you do get a nice wine barrel nose to it. My guess would be French wine, French oak. I'm not sure. You can tell immediately that this is going to be a sour beer. This beer is also certainly fruity, but very different. It's got these same berry notes, but it's so funny, like you get like a tartness to a raspberry versus like raspberry jam or raspberry candy here. Here you're getting like, I just picked a berry, it's got a lot of acid to it, and that's what the smell here is. Like cherries and raspberries. There is an underlying dark dirtiness to it as well. That's from the Brett, but I'm curious what that is. Worries me a little bit. This beer is about a year old. They have made it since, but this is the first batch of it, and the Brett is certainly there. It's nice. It's got a nice clean nose to it as well. I don't get a lot of like crazy acetone notes or a ton of vinegar. There is some acetic character, that being a vinegar versus a lactic acid note. But yeah, really nice smelling. A lot of wood character here. I'm tasting wood. I'm tasting the tannins in the wood. It's got this almost bordering on astringent quality from the wood. It is sour, but it's not completely puckeringly sour. It has a nice kind of caramel malt underbody. You actually do get some of the malt here. And there is that underlying dirtiness to it as well. Almost like you picked up some fruit that was just kind of sitting in some dusty dirt and then kind of popped it in your mouth. And it tastes good, and then you've got this like, there's something like a little funky going on there. And the wood is really prevalent. I like this beer. You know, I'm gonna go 89.90 with this one. It's got solid bones here. I very much would like to try batch 2 or subsequent batches to see where it goes. I'd like personally to see some of the fruit character. Well, I think the fruit character is fine. I think that the levels are fine where it is if you drop out the wood. You know, there's certain, you can either bring up the fruit, but I think that might make things a little too candy-ish. I'd like to see the wood character maybe drop down a little bit and see what that does to it. Me personally, that's just me. All right, and then finally, the beer with the label made out of wood. So this is Volume 1, their first, I guess, spirit barrel aged beer. Give myself a tiny little rinse here. Give myself a time check. Okay, we're doing all right. This guy is coming in at 10.5%. Yeah, coffee and chocolate, or cacao, which, if that's your safe word, like, ooh, I shouldn't have just licked that little drip that was coming down. A lot of chocolate in here. Super black. Man, this smells good. Ooh, this is nice. I'm getting the spirit barrel quality, like the bourbon or the whiskey. I'm getting a chocolate for sure, and I'm getting the coffee. That's a good start. The coffee is a little bit of like a roasty ground coffee rather than that like deep, rich kind of like just smelling a coffee bean. It's got a little bit of that kind of like red pepper or that like chili note to it. Maybe that's from the coffee as well, or the combination of like the coffee and the whiskey. It almost reminds me of some of these like Mexican chocolates that have some heat to them. Wow. It's really nice. It's got a nice, thick, soft, creamy mouthfeel. The chocolate does a lot for this beer. It doesn't really make it a chocolate beer, but it really holds some of the other components in check here. I was like, ooh, this is pretty boozy. But then that chocolate kicked in and kind of smoothed it out, some of the sweetness from the chocolate and that chocolate flavor. Same with the mouthfeel. I think it fills it out and just makes it feel like really nice and creamy. Because you equate chocolate and like milk and milk chocolate, and it just puts these thoughts in your brain. You're like, yeah, I like how that works. Hold on. So when you first take the sip, the first thing you get is barrel. Immediately followed by some of the bourbon or some of the whiskey in there, and then coffee, and then finally the chocolate kicks in. The chocolate kind of lingers for a while, and then as you swallow, you get some of this bitterness from the roast malts, and I'm sure it's got some hops in there too, some bittering hops, and then the chocolate comes back in. Really nice. I think this is a pretty complex beer, and a beer that I would like to get a full glass of and just kind of think through. This is quite a nice beer. One of the things I respect in brewers is their ability to take a lot of ingredients and make a complex beer where every element is working in harmony and also evident. If you're going to put coffee in there, I want to taste the coffee. If you put chocolate in there, or ginger, or hibiscus, I want to taste it. But I don't want it to be overpowering. It's supposed to work as a whole within the beer. So, really good. I'm going to go 95 with this one. This one is, just to me, hitting all the right notes. Yeah. Really solid beer. I'm very glad that I opened this one up. Guys, Kevin, thank you so much for bringing this beer over. He brought me these two. I think he knew what he was doing. Guys, thank you so much. Four Hands Brewing out of St. Louis. Keep the comments coming in. Thank you guys so much for all the emails and for all the donations and gifts that you guys have been giving me. You know, these certainly being included in that. Feel free to drop me a line or leave a rating or review on iTunes. I always appreciate that very much. Or just go to craftbeertemple.com. Got some fun stuff headed there as well. That's about it, guys. Thanks again so much. Until next time, no question which one I'm going to be trying. I've got some great, well-made Russian Imperial Stout to drink, and hopefully you do too.